Kia ora, welcome to Under the Checkered Flag, MotoGP edition. I'm your host Kate, and we're just going to jump right in.
That's not entirely true. We're not going to jump right in today because we just want to say really quickly that our thoughts are with the people of Valencia and wishing their area a very speedy recovery. If you don't know what's happened, there was significant flooding, natural disaster level flooding, and there was a significant loss of life in the area, as well as destruction of property. We are dropping the Aspar team's GoFundMe in the description below, so please, if you can, consider donating. But most of all, we just want to reiterate our thoughts with the people of Valencia. Because of this disaster, MotoGP, IRTA, Dorna, they have decided to not cancel the final race of the season, but it is going to be shifted. At the time of recording, it does look like it's going to be in Barcelona on the original date. So we will be getting that final round of racing, but again, that's not the priority here. The priority is the people of Valencia, and yeah, our thoughts are definitely with them. Now, on to myself, PozzA, and Kelly talking about the racing. So, Moto 3 was a race. It was quite heartbreaking for me as a Tayo Ferrasado fan, but also it just showed how David Alonso was so successful. I am so curious as to think if you guys both think that David Alonso will beat Valentino Rossi's Moto 3 winning percentage record, which he will break if he wins the next race. What do you guys think?
I think it's very possible, and I think it is going to happen. Knowing how much of a streak David Alonso's on, it's kind of just a given that it's going to happen. Let's be real. I don't think Gallo or Vire is going to end up beating him, and yeah, it's just going to go straight to him. I am also a bit livid over for Sasha. I would have liked to see him get a win, and I think he definitely would have deserved it. But a podium is a podium, still very deserved. Um, I'm just happy Vire finished. if we're being honest. I would have liked a podium, but the fact that he finished the race is better than he has been doing these last couple of races, so I will take it. Race overall was a bit dramatic, I'll put it that way. I'm a bit livid that Scott Ogden had to retire because he wasn't doing too bad in terms of pace, and then had a mechanical and then didn't get to finish. So that was a bit annoying, but apart from that, quite a good race.
Yeah, I think with the fact that we're also going back to a track that David Alonso's already won at this year, I feel like he'll be even more motivated, sort of, to take the final victory. And yeah, the fact that he's going up to Moto2 last year, that's always a motivating factor to try and win your last Moto3 race. So I think he absolutely can get it done.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, like you said, it's somewhere he's won before. He is so strong, and his racecraft is truly stunning. Some other things that I just thought to mention with Moto 3 is David Munoz. I don't know if he's ever going to learn, and it's sort of getting to that point where he's falling into the Jeremy Alcoba style camp. In, I believe it was practice, he tagged the back of Farioli and crashed the latter rider out. Fortunately, the stewards did throw the book at him, and he did get a ride-through penalty, which completely ruined his race. One other thing is my Honda heart is absolutely broken. Honda bought a new engine, and it was a disaster. So we know for a fact that both Leopard boys had it, and also Scott Ogden had it. All three had to retire from the race. We saw Fernandez's bike smoking, and Scott Ogden was quoted as saying the power just completely cut out on the straight. So overall, a bit of a devastating weekend for a lot of the podcast favourites. But what other thoughts do you guys have on the race?
I think one of the positives with the Honda's like engine failures this week was it's the 2025 engine that they were essentially just testing out in race trim. So at least it's not like at the start of next year where they go out and all of them fail. At least they have time to sort of rectify the problems. Overall, thought it was a pretty good race. Yeah, it's Moto 3, so it's always going to be somewhat entertaining. Another strong result by Ferrasado, but David Alonso was just too strong in the end.
What I did, like I said before, the race for me wasn't the best in terms of riders, but what I did find funny was Chevy Zeratuza going down after doing a wheelie post race. There's a video I believe on the MotoGP Instagram, and he got a lift back, thank God, but all you could see was him going down in the background. He is okay, but I thought it was kind of funny and needed to be mentioned.
Yeah, we did see a few injuries throughout the field, so hopefully Zeratuza isn't one of them. But yeah, when you're doing a wheelie and you just see him start to lose it, a little bit embarrassing, and I can imagine that he's highly, highly embarrassed that that got caught on camera. Moto 2, we did see some decent racing. It was definitely more interesting than the snooze fest that was MotoGP. Big shout out to Eisen Guevara, who got his maiden podium. Definitely gifted to him a little bit by the way of Agura having a technical issue. And another incident which I'll ask you about in a moment. The podium also had Jorge Navarro and Celestino Vietti. But the main talking point has to be Jake Dixon absolutely blowing it. He crossed the line, did an Alicia Spargaro, and thought the race was over. He was in the podium place at the time. I think fortunately for him, it was his teammate right behind him. So that's got to lessen the blow a little bit, especially because Aspar is a Valencian team. But what did you guys think when you saw this?
I don't really want to talk about what Jake did, to be honest. For God's sake, I had you in my predictions. You were going to get me a good few points, and it was going to be grand. And then you blew it. Why? Why? It was heartbreaking. Can we put it that way? It was very bloody annoying. Then Ayagura didn't finish the race either, and then I was like, for God's sake, it just wasn't really going my way at all. It was very annoying, really annoying. The podium wasn't really one I expected. I'll put it that way. Celestino Vietti. I'll always appreciate a Vietti win, so it wasn't a problem for me. But I was not expecting Navarro and Guevara to finish on the podium. So it was entertaining. We'll put it that way. It's a new podium, new people. Great to see.
Yeah, it was good, very good result by Vietti. I think he went from the front row, just off the front row, and managed to be leading by almost a second and a half on the first lap, which is just kind of insane, especially because he's got a shoulder injury that he's carrying. So to be able to carry that through the entire race was really impressive by Vietti. Um, Wanted to give a shout out to Jorge Navarro. Obviously, he's not on the grid full time, which I've seen plenty of people not really being able to believe over the weekend, thinking he should definitely have a ride, which I agree with. Some of the things he's done in replacement rides this year just been really impressive. So I'd like to see him get a full-time ride eventually. And yeah, first podium for Guevara, which again was really nice to see, especially with how much he's sort of been struggling with Moto 2 in the last year and a half, sort of thing. So yeah, I thought it was really positive to see him up there on the podium.
And with Eisen's podium, I do think that it's probably come at quite a good time. Now he's looking almost certain to head to Pramex Moto 2 team with Tony Arbolino. So I just think it's great. It's his best result, and I did expect a little bit more faster, but I'm finally glad that he's really starting to show his potential because he was so incredible in Moto3. Poz, I'll pass back to you for Rookie Corner.
Yeah, for no particular reason, I decided to bring up the rookies this week. Top rookie in Moto2 was Dennis Onchu in 7th, got 5th place on the grid in qualifying, had a pretty solid race, especially for a rookie. Diego Moreira was in 10th, and Jaume Masia just missed out on the points in 16th, with Agi in 17th, and no other rookies had a result really worth mentioning. I'd just like to point out the fact that going into the final race, there's now only 3 riders in Rookie of the Year contention, which are Diogo Moreira, Senna Agius, and Dennis Onchu. So could be an interesting battle in the final race between those 3.
Awfully confident. I, for one, have to admit, I think Diogo's going to take it just with how strong he's been lately. But for obvious reasons, this podcast is rooting for Onto to take it. MotoGP then. This was quite a wild weekend, I suppose. And much like Jorge Martin's brother, I was pacing for a lot of the Saturday and Sunday. Before we talk about that, I want to get your thoughts on that qualifying session because I think this is probably the best qualifying session in at least a good few years. Basically, what happened was Jorge Martin destroyed the lap record by, I think it was 0.9 of a second and 0.9 seconds. It was a stunning lap. It was jaws drop material. And you think that he's got pole locked, loaded, and delivered. And then I think it was very shortly after that, Pecco Bagnaia set a red sector 1, and somehow he kept it up. He outqualified Jorge Martin, who had just set an amazing lap. He sets a 156.337. We were well over a second ahead of last year's lap record. It was just sensational. What did you guys think of the qualifying session?
It was a very good qualifying session. I think I didn't get to see it live, unfortunately, which sucked. But I was just very annoyed that Marco Bezzecchi and Pedro Acosta were out in Q1. So already at that point, I was kind of like, oh, I wasn't very interested. But then the lap records, like you mentioned, came through, and I was like, okay, like Jesus, it wasn't something I was expecting, not at all. Franco Morbidelli, I'd have to give props to, as much as it pains me to do so. P4, considering his last results, which were pretty bad, P4 in qualifying isn't too bad. So good for you, Frankie. Can't wait to see you screw it up next weekend as well. Um, yeah, no, in terms of actually an actual entertainment, it was very, very good to watch. I enjoyed it personally.
Yeah, as many people have said, it was probably one of the most exciting Q2 sessions we've had since that format's been introduced. Just seeing Martin go that much quicker on his first run was obviously really impressive and something we've sort of become accustomed to seeing with Jorge, just being super quick straight out the gates. But Pecco managing to respond with just an even better lap was really exciting at the time and could be one of possibly like a lap that we look back on in the future as one of the best qualifying laps possibly ever. So yeah, really good qualifying session.
And the qualifying session just, I suppose, ramped up the tension. It kind of felt inevitable after that this was going to be Pecco's weekend. It definitely wasn't. It did not translate. The podium on Saturday was Enea Bastianini in P3, Marc Marquez in P2, and Jorge Martin in P1 because Bagnaia bottled it. I just couldn't believe it, to be honest. He needed a result here, and I have to think that that's the championship gone for him. It's Jorge Martin's to lose now. We will touch on it a bit more when we talk about the race. I do just want to shout out to Fabio Quartararo, who P5 in the sprint. It was pretty sensational, even if it was a bit of a snoozy sprint. But what were your guys' thoughts on the sprint?
It wasn't the most entertaining race I've ever watched, but definitely Pekka Bagnaia going down brought it up dramatically. I was very annoyed. I'm gonna be real. I thought that was his championship like totally over. Now, of course, it's basically over, unfortunately, but I still hold up to that little shred of delusional hope, and I thought it was all gone on Saturday because Pekka, what are you doing, mate? What are you doing? Um, Aside from that, a slightly deserved win from Jorge Martin, and yeah, there's not really much else to talk about. It wasn't the most eventful thing I've ever watched.
It was a very costly error for Bagnaia, and as again everyone's been saying, very likely the one that'll fully put an L in the coffin of his sort of title hopes. Losing 12 points in this sort of stage of the season to your title rival isn't obviously ideal, and with the fact that Martin can now wrap it up in the sprint by only needing to outscore Bagnaia by 2 points, makes it seem a lot more like impossible for Bagnaia to win. But I'm sure he'll be back next year, probably fighting not Martin, but fighting Marquez. Just needs to learn from all the mistakes that he's made this year and try not to recreate them next year, because hard to say that Mark will be making the level of mistakes that the two this year have been.
I definitely agree. It seems like while Touchwood being a Martin fan, it seems that he's used that summer break just after his big bottle to truly work on his mentality and mindset, and he's been super consistent in the second half of the season, something that Pecco's really going to need if he wants to fight Marquez next year. Moving on to the race, that makes me wonder as well, because we saw Jorge Martin and Pecco Bagnaia have a brilliant battle in the first few laps, and then Martin stopped battling, basically. He settled for second, which is so mature of him, which is finally that maturity from him. I should really say it like that, because he's grown so much this year, and I guess I just want to know what you guys think now we're sort of at the tail end of the season, everything's settled down, but do you think that Jorge Martin could have done anything more to get that factory ride, and do you think it was the right choice picking Marquez over Martin?
I don't think he could have done more. I think it was kind of just a given that he was never going to get that right ever. It wasn't going to happen, unfortunately. Personally, I'm not even happy that Marquez got it. I would have preferred it to. It might be biased, but I would have preferred that it stayed with Enea Bastianini. I don't think he's done enough to lose it, but that's my biased opinion. But like I said, Jorge Martin was never getting that right. I don't. Whatever people say, whatever he could have done differently, it wouldn't have changed. He was never getting it, unfortunate as it is.
Yeah, I still think Ducati could have just gone with the mindset that they have the best bike and two of the best riders, that they didn't really need Mark, and if he wanted a factory ride, he could have just gone elsewhere, and they could have backed their riders and their bike to keep beating him. But it is what it is. Still don't think Jorge could have done anything more to deserve it. Obviously, beating Bagnaia to win, hasn't done it yet, but beating Bagnaia to win this year's title just sort of shows that there's nothing else he could have done.
So, looking at the race as a whole, like I said, sensational racing in the first 3 laps. Probably some of the best racing that we've seen in quite a while, especially with this aero era that we're in. But I do want to mention the incident that happened very early on in the race. Thankfully, we do know all riders are okay. It was a huge crash, basically. We saw both KTM's and Fabio Quartararo go down. We saw Jack Miller, basically his legs got run over, his helmet twisted completely around, and we saw his head go into, I suppose, in between the rear wheel and the bike. We saw all this because while Jack Miller wasn't up and while medics were treating him on the track, we got a replay. And it wasn't even just like a small replay, it showed it quite graphically. And given the track we're at and what else has happened at this track with Sick, I just thought that was in such poor taste. Fortunately, we did see Jack up and walking before we got back racing, because it would have been quite hard and definitely dulled the race a bit, for me at least, if we didn't know that he was all good. How he's all good just shows the advancements in technology. But aside from that incident, or if you do want to discuss the incident, all good. What did you guys think as of this race as a whole?
Um, the race in terms of entertainment after like the first 2 laps was boring. Well, would it be boring? No, it just wasn't very entertaining. I'll put it that way. It wasn't as dramatic as, let's say, last week's races because they were very dramatic. Um, I'm just happy that Pecco won because on Saturday he gave me quite a scare, and when to be real, I was terrified. I thought he'd lost it completely. But no, came back through to win. About 3 or 4 seconds ahead of Martin, so wasn't too bad. Still going to be very hard for him to win the championship, but I am delusional, as everyone knows, and I will hold out faith that he does. The crash between Binder and Miller was pretty terrifying, actually. Even like every angle you look at, it was horrifying, and I'm just happy both are okay from what we know. Um, Luca Marini got a point. Yay, that's something. That's actually so sad. I used to be happy when you finished like the top 10. Now I'm happy that he got a point. Anyway, yeah, like I said, in terms of racing, it was just kind of, but in terms of the championship battles, very good.
Yeah, I thought it was a shame that with the aero and front tire pressure sort of managing that they have to do nowadays, that the fact that Martin sort of had to cut that battle short. Some of the moves they were making were just really entertaining to watch. Super aggressive but clean, which is what I like personally. But yeah, Martin just had to drop back to sort of manage his tire pressures after a bit, and after that point, Bagnaia is just way too strong at managing his pace and managing gaps. There's nothing more Martin really could have done. But I thought the first sort of 5 laps were probably the most exciting laps we've seen in the last few years easily, and sort of made up for the fact that the rest of the race didn't have a lot of substance. But yeah, I thought it was a good race just on those first laps alone, and still made the title fight slightly interesting, which is always good to see.
As always, thanks so much for being here. We're here most Mondays talking about the racing, and we are going to have off-season content as well, so you can get your MotoGP fix all year round. Thanks so much for listening to us ramble. Our thoughts again with the people of Valencia, and like and subscribe if you do find yourself coming back, because that really helps us grow. And I've promised PozzA an extra beer at Phillip Island next year if we hit that 500 subscriber mark. So help PozzA get his free beer. That's what it's all about. But we'll see you next week.